The arena was built for spectacle, not mercy. White stone rose in perfect concentric circles beneath a sky the color of burned gold, its open ceiling allowing the sun to witness every death without blinking. Tens of thousands of voices pressed down like weight, a living force of expectation and hunger. This was not a battlefield. It was a confession. Every empire that had ever feared her had poured its terror into this place, dressed it in marble and called it justice. She stood alone at the center. Her armor caught the light in sharp, deliberate angles, black alloy traced with gold filigree, ceremonial and lethal in equal measure. It was not designed to protect her. It was designed to remind everyone watching that she did not need protection. The sword rested upright before her, its point touching the stone, her gloved hands folded over the hilt. The blade was older than the arena, older than most of the empires represented in the stands. Its metal did not shine. It drank light, as if it remembered wars the sun itself had tried to forget. A faint symbol glowed at the center of her forehead, etched into her skin like a scar that refused to fade. Pale blue, ancient. A mark reserved for one purpose only. Chosen. The crowd did not chant her name. They whispered it. Velaryx, the terror of the inner systems, breaker of the Caliph armadas, the woman who had knelt 3 star nations without glassing a single world and been hated for it more than for any massacre. She did not look at the crowd. She never did. Her eyes were fixed on the opposite gate, where polished steel doors towered in silence. That was where her opponent would emerge. That was where the ritual would complete itself. A challenger selected by the council, armed, trained, and offered the impossible promise of becoming legend by killing her. No one had succeeded. Not once. A horn sounded, low, resonant, vibrating through bone rather than air. The gates began to open. Velaryx exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar calm settle into her muscles, her mind narrowing into something sharp and precise. Combat was the only language that had never lied to her. Strategy could be twisted, politics could rot, loyalty could fracture, but intent expressed through violence, that was always honest. The gates fully parted, and the arena shifted, not with sound but with confusion. The figure who stepped through did not wear ceremonial armor. No house sigils, no gilded crests, just functional combat gear, dark, matte, scarred by use rather than design. Human. A ripple moved through the stands, disbelief passing from mouth to mouth. Velaryx's fingers tightened fractionally around the sword hilt. A human had never been chosen before. They were too fragile, the council claimed, too unpredictable, too emotionally compromised. Useful as advisors, technicians, diplomats, but not as ritual instruments. And yet here he was. He stopped several meters away, boots scraping lightly against the stone. He did not bow, interesting. He removed his helmet. Brown eyes, focused, not wide with awe, not burning with hatred, just steady. The face of someone who understood exactly where he stood and had decided to stand there anyway. Velaryx felt it then, a faint, unfamiliar tension beneath her ribs. Not fear, curiosity. The herald's voice boomed across the arena, amplified and merciless. By decree of the unified council, a champion has been selected to challenge Velaryx of the Aurelian Dominion. Victory grants honor, title, and the right to end her reign. A pause, then almost reluctantly, state your name. The human did not look away from her when he answered. Elias Rowan. The name meant nothing to the crowd. It did not mean nothing to her. Velaryx straightened, lifting the sword from the stone in one smooth motion. The blade sang softly as it moved, a sound only warriors noticed, a resonance as if it recognized her grip. "You are aware," she said, her voice carrying without effort, calm and resonant, "that this is not a duel. This is an execution ritual." "Yes," Elias replied. "You are aware that I will not hesitate." "Yes." "You are aware," she continued, eyes locked on his, "that if you fall you will not be remembered as brave. You will be remembered as useful." A corner of his mouth twitched, not into a smile but something close. "I didn't come to be remembered." The crowd leaned forward. Velaryx studied him now, truly studied him, the way she would a battlefield before committing troops. His stance was balanced but not aggressive, his breathing controlled. His hands relaxed at his sides, not empty, she realized, but ready. "You are not afraid," she observed. "I am," he said simply. "I just don't think fear should decide everything." That tension beneath her ribs tightened. The horn sounded again. Combat was authorized. Velaryx raised her sword, its edge catching the light, the glowing mark on her forehead pulsing faintly in response. The arena seemed to hold its breath. She had faced warriors who wanted her power, assassins who wanted her death, fanatics who wanted her myth. But the human before her did not look at her like Elias did not charge. That alone set him apart from the dozens who had tried to kill her before. Most challengers opened with aggression, speed, brute force, spectacle, meant to impress the council before impressing the blade. They rushed her center line, hoping momentum would compensate for the impossible gap between them. Elias moved sideways, not retreat, not advance, a measured lateral step that forced Velaryx to adjust her angle, to recalculate. Interesting. She advanced instead, long strides eating distance, sword moving in a clean arc designed not to test but to end. The blade cut through the air where his neck had been a heartbeat earlier. He was already gone. Stone cracked beneath his boots as he pivoted, drawing a short weapon from his hip, compact, human-forged, humming faintly with restrained energy. Not a sword, not a spear. Something designed for close quarters, for exploiting openings rather than creating them. Velaryx felt a flicker of irritation. She despised inefficient tools. Their weapons met with a sharp, discordant sound, her ancient blade rejecting the unfamiliar material of his. Sparks scattered bright against the pale stone. The crowd gasped as Elias slid backward from the impact, boots skidding, arms absorbing force that should have shattered bone. He grimaced. She did not miss it. "Your stance is wrong," she said as she pressed forward, her strikes flowing in a sequence perfected across decades of war. "You're compensating for reach instead of controlling distance." "Noted," Elias replied, breath tight but steady. He ducked beneath a horizontal cut that would have taken his head and rolled, coming up inside her guard, dangerously close. Too close for comfort, too close for ritual. Her elbow snapped out on instinct. He took the hit, grunting as it drove air from his lungs, but his free hand caught her wrist. The arena fell silent. No one touched Velaryx, not like that. She twisted immediately, torque and strength working together to break his grip. He let go before damage could be done, stumbling back, pain written briefly across his face before discipline erased it. Velaryx stepped away as well, eyes narrowed. "You are adapting," she said. "I had good teachers," he answered. "You will still lose." "Probably." That answer drew laughter from the stands, uneasy, uncertain. Elias didn't look at them. His focus never left her. Velaryx circled now, sword held low, her movements smooth and deliberate. The mark on her forehead pulsed faintly, responding to elevated threat levels, ancient systems older than science aligning her perception with probability and force. She saw 3 possible endings in the next 10 seconds. None favored him. She lunged. This time, Elias didn't evade. He stepped into the attack, raising his weapon not to block the blade but to strike its flat, redirecting momentum rather than resisting it. The maneuver was clumsy compared to her elegance, but effective enough to alter the angle. Her sword skimmed past his shoulder instead of cleaving through it. Too close. Her knee drove upward toward his ribs. He caught it with both arms, staggering under the impact, boots digging into stone. For a fraction of a second they were locked together, her strength pressing down, his body straining to remain upright. Their eyes met. Up close she saw it. Not defiance, not desperation. Resolve, the kind that did not ask for permission. Elias released her leg abruptly and dropped backward, forcing her to regain balance or risk falling forward. She recovered instantly, but her rhythm had been disrupted. That had been intentional. "You're not trying to kill me," Velaryx said. Elias inhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders, blood trickling from a split lip. No. The admission rippled through the arena like a crack in glass. This is an execution ritual, she reminded him, voice low. There is no victory without death. Then, he said quietly, the ritual is flawed. Her blade stopped mid-arc. That more than any strike drew her full attention. Explain, she commanded. Elias straightened slowly, lowering his weapon, not surrendering but changing posture, exposing himself. A calculated risk. They didn't choose me to kill you, he said. They chose me to measure you. Velaryx's gaze sharpened. The council doesn't measure threats, she said. They erase them. They do both, Elias replied. But this time, they weren't sure which you were. The mark on her forehead flared brighter for an instant, reacting not to physical danger but to something far more volatile. Truth. You were never meant to fall today, he continued. You were meant to reveal yourself, how tired you are, how much you still care, whether the myth still matches the woman. Silence crushed the arena. Velaryx felt something twist inside her chest, sharp, unwelcome. You presume to speak for the council, she said, voice cold. For someone who stands on the wrong side of my blade. I presume to speak for myself, Elias answered. They promised me survival if I lasted long enough, a pardon, a quiet life afterward. And you believed them. No, he said, I believed you. Her grip tightened. You do not know me. I know you ended the Caliph War by targeting fleets instead of cities. A step closer. I know you refused orbital bombardment on Sorrel Prime, even when it would have ended the campaign in a day. Another step. I know you've carried the weight of every civilian death anyway. Velaryx moved without conscious thought. The sword was at his throat in a blink, its edge a whisper from skin, close enough that he could feel its cold presence with every breath. The crowd erupted. Guards tensed. The ritual teetered on the edge of collapse. Elias did not flinch. Kill me, he said softly, and prove them right, and show them you're more than what they're afraid of. The words were not shouted. They were offered. Velaryx stared into his eyes and, for the first time since stepping into the arena, felt something she could not immediately destroy. Choice. The mark on her forehead dimmed, confused by the absence of a clear outcome. Slowly survival was never the council's preferred outcome. That truth settled over the arena as Velaryx shifted her stance, not into an execution posture but into something far rarer. A duelist's guard, balanced, controlled, open to response rather than domination. Those who understood combat felt it immediately. This was no longer spectacle. This was assessment. Elias felt the change like a pressure drop before a storm. The air itself seemed to tighten, the sun overhead suddenly harsh against his skin. He adjusted his grip, rolling his shoulders, forcing breath into muscles that had begun to burn. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to widen distance. He did neither. Velaryx advanced, but not with lethal intent. Her blade moved in probing arcs now, testing reactions rather than committing to outcomes. Elias responded on instinct, redirecting, evading, occasionally countering where openings appeared. Each exchange sharpened the invisible thread between them. She was watching him, not as prey, not as enemy, as data. You were trained for this, Velaryx said between strikes. Not ritual combat, adaptive engagement. Yes, Elias replied, parrying with both arms, screaming in protest. Human intelligence services prioritizes survivability over victory. A philosophy of weakness, she said. A philosophy of endurance. Their weapons met again, force traveling up his arms, teeth rattling. He staggered back 2 steps this time, barely recovering balance. She did not press the advantage. That restraint unsettled him more than her strength. You could end this, Elias said. You know that. Yes. Then why haven't you? Velaryx did not answer immediately. She circled him again, sunlight glinting along the gold lines of her armor, the glowing mark on her forehead steady now, observing rather than warning. Because, she said at last, you are not lying. The admission struck harder than any blow. Elias swallowed, sweat stinging his eyes. That's not usually enough. For me, she corrected, it is rare. They moved again, faster now. The pace increased, forcing Elias into full concentration. He adapted where he could, relying on leverage, footwork, timing, anything that let him remain upright under the sheer difference in strength. And still, he was losing ground. Velaryx disarmed him with a sudden twist, sending his weapon skittering across the stone. The crowd roared, sensing the approaching end. She kicked it farther away with a precise motion, then stepped back. "Pick it up," she said. Elias hesitated. "I won't kill you while you're unarmed," she added. "This is no longer that kind of test." He retrieved the weapon, fingers shaking now despite his effort to control them. His lungs burned. His vision blurred at the edges. "You're evaluating something specific," he said between breaths. "What is it?" Velaryx stopped circling. She faced him fully. "How much you are willing to endure," she said, "without becoming cruel." The words hit him with unexpected weight. The horn sounded again, longer this time, distorted. A signal meant for interruption. The stands erupted into confused noise as council delegates began shouting orders, their projections flickering into view above the arena. Velaryx did not look at them, her gaze never left Elias. "They are dissatisfied," she said calmly. "They wanted blood, preferably mine, failing that yours." Elias followed her gaze briefly, catching glimpses of rigid faces, thin smiles turning sharp with anger. "They're going to declare this invalid." "Yes, and then they will attempt to correct the outcome." Her sword lowered slightly, its tip resting near the stone. "Which means," Elias said slowly, "this stops being ritual." Velaryx's lips curved faintly, precisely. The first energy bolt struck the arena wall, exploding stone into dust and fragments. Screams erupted as spectators scrambled, the illusion of safety collapsing instantly. Council enforcement units, hidden until now, descended from above, sleek armored forms cutting through the air. Velaryx moved. In a single motion, she crossed the distance between them and seized Elias by the collar, hauling him close enough that he could hear her voice beneath the chaos. "You were correct about one thing," she said. "They chose you because they believed you would not matter if you died." She pulled him with her as she sprinted, the ground trembling beneath incoming fire. They were wrong. A blast tore through the stone where they'd stood seconds earlier. Elias stumbled as she released him behind a fallen column, her body already turning back toward the threat. "Stay here," she ordered. "No," he said immediately. She looked at him sharply. "This is no longer symbolic," she warned. "This is lethal." "So was the arena," he shot back. "Difference is now you're not alone." For a heartbeat, something unreadable passed through her eyes. Then she nodded once. "Then keep up." She charged into the fray like a force of nature unbound, her blade moving with lethal precision now, no longer restrained by ritual. Elias followed, not beside her but with her, covering angles she didn't need, striking where distraction created opportunity. They fought not as commander and asset, but as two people who had, inexplicably, chosen the same side. Above them, the sky darkened as more enforcement craft descended. Velaryx cut down an advancing unit and turned toward Elias, eyes blazing. "This," she said, voice fierce and alive, "is where the council loses control." He met her gaze, breath ragged but steady. "And what happens after?" For the first time since stepping into the arena, Velaryx smiled. "We decide." Decision was a luxury Velaryx had not allowed herself in decades. Yet here it was burning, immediate, unavoidable, as council enforcement units poured into the arena with the blunt efficiency of those authorized to erase outcomes they disliked. "Move," Velaryx commanded, already shifting position. Elias followed without hesitation. They cut through collapsed arches and shattered seating, stone dust clogging the air, the sun now fractured into sharp beams by drifting debris. Energy fire hissed past them, scorching marble, vaporizing banners that once bore the insignia of unity and law. Velaryx vaulted a fallen column, landed hard, and pivoted mid-stride to deflect a plasma bolt with her blade. The impact rippled through her arm, harmless but insistent, a reminder that restraint had ended. "Left flank," Elias called. She adjusted instantly. They were not communicating tactics so much as completing them, his warnings arriving a breath before her movements, her positioning creating openings he exploited without being told. It was not practiced coordination. It was alignment. A transport screamed overhead, lowering rapidly. Its underside split open, disgorging a full suppression squad in synchronized descent. Velaryx felt the mark on her forehead flare violently. "Enough," she said. She slammed the sword point first into the stone. The arena reacted, not metaphorically, literally. Ancient conduits buried beneath the marble woke as if from slumber, lines of light igniting in complex patterns that radiated outward from the blade. The crowd screamed as energy surged through the structure, disabling shields, shorting weapons, throwing enforcement units off balance. Elias stared. "You built this place," he said. "Yes," Velaryx replied, "long ago as a reminder." "Of what?" She pulled the sword free, the glow stabilizing. "That power should never belong solely to those who claim authority." But she moved again, devastating in her efficiency now. Each strike ended a threat. Each step reclaimed space. The Council's forces, trained for compliance and intimidation, struggled against an opponent who no longer played by their script. Elias did not try to match her lethality. He focused on survival, hers and his. A unit slipped past her guard, aiming directly for her exposed flank. Elias intercepted without thinking, firing at point-blank range, the recoil slamming through his arms. The unit fell, but not before a bolt tore across his shoulder, burning through fabric and skin. He cried out, staggered. Velaryx turned at the sound. For an instant, the world narrowed. She crossed the distance in 2 strides, blade flashing, ending the remaining threats with brutal finality. She caught Elias before he fell, one arm bracing him effortlessly. "You are injured," she said, voice sharp. "Still functional," he gasped, teeth clenched. "Don't stop." She did not release him immediately. Her gaze searched his face, blood, pain, stubborn resolve. Not fear, never fear. "Why?" she demanded quietly. "You were given a chance to disappear after the ritual failed. You could have survived this without me." Elias met her eyes, breath shallow. "Because if I walk away now," he said, "then everything I said to you was strategy." Her grip tightened. "And it wasn't," he continued, "it was choice." The mark on her forehead dimmed, its glow steadying into something softer, almost contemplative. She let him go, nodding once. "Then stay alive," she said. "I will not carry you." "Fair." But the arena was collapsing now, physically and politically. Fires burned in the stands. Council delegates were evacuating under heavy guard, their authority cracking as feeds across the system broadcast what they had tried to suppress. Velaryx could feel it, the shift, the myth breaking open. A final enforcement craft descended, heavier than the rest, its weapons priming with a familiar, ominous hum. Elias recognized it instantly. "That's not crowd control," he said. "That's erasure." Velaryx's jaw set. "They mean to kill us both," she said, publicly, definitively. "Options?" Elias asked. She looked up at the craft, then down at the blade in her hand. "There is one," she said, "but it changes everything." Everything already changed. She glanced at him, really glanced at him. "You would be hunted," she warned. "By your own people, by mine, you would never have safety again." Elias didn't hesitate. "I didn't come here for safety." The craft's weapon systems locked on. Velaryx stepped forward, raising her sword not toward the enemy, but toward the sky itself. "Then witness," she said softly, "the end of their permission." But she drove the blade upward. The mark on her forehead erupted in blinding light as the ancient system answered, not as a weapon, but as a declaration. Energy surged skyward in a column so bright it turned day into white silence. The enforcement craft systems failed instantly, its engines stalling midair. It fell, not exploding, not firing, just falling. The shockwave rolled across the arena, knocking Elias to one knee. Velaryx remained standing, radiant and terrifying, the embodiment of something no council had ever truly controlled. When the dust settled, the sky was empty. Silence followed. Velaryx lowered the blade slowly and turned to Elias. "This," she said, voice calm and irrevocable, "means war." Elias rose unsteadily, meeting her gaze. "No," he said. "It means choice finally belongs to the people involved." Her lips curved. They did not leave the arena as victors. They left as fugitives. The realization settled over Elias as emergency sirens wailed across the shattered complex, and the remaining council security scrambled, not to pursue immediately, but to contain the narrative. Smoke climbed in slow, ugly columns. Drones buzzed overhead, already reconstructing angles, editing reality in real time. Velaryx ignored it all. She moved with purpose now, not urgency. Every step was deliberate, her posture unchanged by the knowledge that the galaxy had just watched her refuse permission. "Follow," she said, turning toward a passageway half buried beneath fallen stone. Elias followed, shoulder burning, lungs still protesting. He didn't ask where they were going. He had crossed that threshold already, the point where questions became irrelevant. The corridor beneath the arena was older than the marble above. Unadorned, functional, built not for ceremony but for retreat. "For someone who didn't plan to lose," Elias said between breaths, "you planned very well for leaving." Velaryx did not slow. "I did not plan to lose," she replied. "I planned for inevitability." The passage opened into a cavernous chamber carved directly into bedrock. Ancient systems hummed faintly to life as she entered, recognizing her presence. A vessel waited at its center, sleek, dark, unmarked. Not imperial, not ceremonial, hidden. Elias stopped short. "You kept this secret," he said. "Yes." "From everyone." Velaryx turned to face him. "From everyone who would try to use it," she said, "including myself." She moved to the vessel, running her hand along its hull. The mark on her forehead dimmed, the glow receding like a tide pulling back. "For decades," she continued, quieter now, "this was my contingency, not escape, reset." Elias frowned. "Reset how?" "By leaving," she said simply. "Letting the myth die, letting the empire fracture and rebuild without me at its center." "And you never did." "No." She looked at him then, and something in her expression shifted, subtle, unguarded. "Because I did not trust anyone else to hold the line." Elias absorbed that. "That's a lot of weight," he said. "It is," she agreed. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. The kind of quiet that came after impact, when everything important had already happened and the body was still catching up. "You could still go," Elias said finally. "Without me, disappear, let them fight over what's left." Velaryx studied him, searching not for strategy but for truth. "And you?" she asked. He met her gaze without hesitation. "I already chose," he said, "in the arena." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You chose me," she said, "not a question." "Yes." The word hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Velaryx turned away first, boarding the vessel. "Then you should understand something." Elias followed, the hatch sealing behind them with a muted hiss. "I do not offer protection," she said, activating systems with practiced efficiency. "I offer proximity, danger, consequence." "That's fine," he replied. "I wasn't looking for safety." The vessel lifted silently, slipping free of the collapsing structure as the cavern ceiling parted. Above them, the sky was chaos, ships maneuvering, signals clashing, authority unraveling. Velaryx set a course without consulting any visible map. "Where are we going?" Elias asked. "To a place," she said, "that remembers me before the title." He leaned back into the seat, exhaustion finally claiming ground. "And after that?" Velaryx's hands paused briefly over the controls. "After that," she said, "we decide what I become next." Elias closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "What about us?" The question was quiet, unforced. Velaryx did not answer immediately. The vessel cleared the atmosphere, stars unfolding ahead of them like an open wound. At last she spoke. You stood before me knowing I could kill you, she said. You spoke to me as if I were not a symbol. You bled for me without being ordered. She turned her head slightly, just enough for him to see her expression. That creates a bond, she said, whether either of us intended it or not. Elias' breath caught, not with anticipation but with understanding. I'm not asking for anything, he said. I just needed to know if this matters. Velaryx looked at him fully now. It does, she said, not promise, not romance. Truth. The vessel jumped to hyperspace, light stretching into infinity around them. Behind them an empire reeled. Ahead of them something undefined waited, unwritten, unpermitted, and dangerously alive. And for the first time in her long, violent reign, Velaryx did not know what the next chapter would demand of her. She found she did not fear that uncertainty, not with him there. Hyperspace was never truly silent. It hummed beneath perception, a pressure against thought, a reminder that reality itself was being bent by force and intent. Elias had traveled this way before, on military transports, covert insertions, extraction runs that left no record. It had always felt utilitarian. This time it felt intimate. The vessel was small, efficient, stripped of ornamentation. No banners, no insignia, just systems, power conduits, and the faint glow of instrumentation. Velaryx moved through it with familiarity that surprised him, not the stride of a ruler inspecting property, but of someone revisiting a place they had once imagined living in. This ship, Elias said quietly, breaking the silence, wasn't built for war. No, Velaryx replied, it was built for absence. She set a diagnostic sequence running and finally allowed herself to sit, the motion slower than before. The adrenaline that had carried her through the arena was fading, leaving behind the accumulated weight of years. Elias noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her breath measured itself now instead of commanding the air. You're injured, he said. Nothing significant. That wasn't an answer. Velaryx glanced at him, then exhaled, long, controlled. Residual damage, neural strain from activating the ancient systems. It will pass. Elias accepted that without argument, though he filed it away. He had learned when to push and when to wait. They drifted in silence for a while, stars stretching and folding beyond the viewport. The galaxy felt very far away. So did the arena. So did the thousands of eyes that had watched them choose defiance. You said we're going somewhere that remembers you, Elias said eventually, before the title. Yes, what were you before? Velaryx's fingers stilled against the console. I was unnamed, she said after a moment. Not in the literal sense, but in the way that matters. I was a weapon in training, promising, exceptional, disposable. Elias didn't interrupt. In Kryn culture, she continued, identity is earned through dominance. You are not someone until others yield to you. Until then, you are potential. And you exceeded that, Elias said. Yes, she agreed. I exceeded it too quickly. She leaned back, gaze unfocused. They gave me command early. Victories followed. Titles accumulated. And somewhere along the way, the woman who fought because she wanted to protect her people became the thing they pointed at when they wanted fear. Elias watched her not as a legend but as someone remembering themselves. I don't think you lost her, he said. Velaryx turned her head slightly. No, he continued. I think she's been waiting for permission to exist again. The mark on her forehead pulsed faintly, responding not to threat but to something internal, recognition perhaps. Permission, Velaryx repeated softly. That is a dangerous word. It doesn't have to be, Elias said. Not if you choose who it comes from. She studied him then longer than before. You are remarkably unafraid of me, she observed. I'm afraid, he corrected. I just don't think fear should define the relationship. Relationship. The word lingered undefined. Velaryx looked away first, returning her attention to the navigation display. We are approaching our destination, she said. Prepare yourself. For what? For contrast. The ship dropped out of hyperspace without warning. Elias sucked in a breath as space reassembled around them, Not into the expected sprawl of stations or warships, but into quiet. A small system, one sun. A single habitable planet below, blue and green and startlingly alive. No fleets, no defenses, no scars of war. What is this place? Elias asked. A retreat, Velaryx said, from a time when I believed power could be shared rather than centralized. The vessel descended through atmosphere, clouds parting to reveal forests, oceans, and a single structure nestled against a mountainside. Stone and light woven together in organic harmony. Elias stared. This isn't a fortress. No, why didn't they destroy it? Velaryx's lips curved faintly. Because they never knew it existed. The ship settled onto a landing platform, grown directly from the rock itself. Systems powered down. Silence followed, real silence this time, broken only by distant wind. Velaryx stood, hesitated for the briefest moment, then turned to Elias. This place has not seen me since I became what the galaxy calls me, she said. If you step off this ship with me, you step into a life that has no script. Elias rose slowly, meeting her gaze. I've been improvising since the arena. A pause. Then Velaryx inclined her head, a gesture of acknowledgement, not command. They exited the vessel together. The air was clean, cool, alive. Elias felt something in his chest loosen that he hadn't realized was tight. Birds, or something like them, scattered from nearby trees, their calls sharp and curious. Velaryx stood very still. This, she said quietly, is where I remember how to breathe. Elias didn't speak. He didn't need to. For the first time, the Terror of Galaxies stood unobserved, unchallenged, unrequired. And for the first time, someone stood beside her without asking her to become anything else. Whatever war waited beyond this world could wait a little longer. Here, in the quiet between stars, something fragile and powerful had begun to take shape. Not a treaty, not an alliance, a possibility. The quiet unsettled her more than any battlefield ever had. Velaryx stood at the edge of the landing platform long after the ship's systems had gone dark, listening to wind move through leaves that had never learned to fear her name. The world responded to her presence without deference or resistance. It simply existed. That absence of reaction felt dangerous. Elias noticed before she spoke. You're bracing, he said. She did not deny it. This place does not demand anything of me. And that's a problem. Yes, she turned to face him, arms folding loosely, not a defensive posture but a grounding one. On the battlefield, purpose is immediate. Every action has consequence. Here there is space. Space invites questions. Elias considered that. Questions aren't enemies. They are when you've spent your life being the answer. They began walking along a stone path that curved toward the structure built into the mountainside. Up close it was less imposing than it had appeared from orbit, open terraces, natural light, no visible weapon systems. It felt personal. You built this, Elias said. Yes, before I understood what the galaxy would require of me. And after I ensured no one remembered it existed. They entered the structure together. Inside, the air was warm, faintly scented with mineral and growing things. Water flowed somewhere unseen. The architecture encouraged stillness, wide spaces, no sharp edges, no choke points. Elias felt it immediately. This place would make terrible sense to your enemies, he said. Velaryx almost smiled. She moved to a central chamber and activated dormant systems. Light bloomed gently, not harsh or commanding, but welcoming. For a moment she stood there as if unsure where to place herself. Sit, she said at last. They did across from one another, separated by a low table grown from stone rather than built. This is where the council will look for you last, Elias said. Yes, and your empire. Her gaze lowered briefly. They will fracture, she said. Some will declare me dead. Others will claim I have abandoned them. Power will be contested. And you're okay with that. Velaryx looked up, eyes steady. I am no longer certain that an empire held together by fear deserves my immediate return. The words surprised them both. Elias watched her carefully. That's not a small admission. No, she agreed. It is treason by another name. Silence settled again, heavier this time. You could still leave, Velaryx said, before the consequences reach you. There are vessels hidden here, routes that lead nowhere important. And you, Elias asked, I will face what comes. He leaned forward slightly. That wasn't the question. Velaryx held his gaze. I do not know, she said honestly. That is the problem. Elias nodded, accepting uncertainty as he always had. Then let's not pretend we know the ending. She studied him, this human who had walked into her execution ritual and refused to die quietly, who now sat across from her without reverence or expectation. You understand what staying means, she said. There will be danger, sacrifice, long periods where I cannot protect you. I didn't stay because you could protect me, Elias replied. I stayed because you shouldn't have to face this alone. The mark on her forehead pulsed once, soft, almost questioning. Velaryx rose abruptly, turning away as if the words had struck too close. She walked to an open terrace overlooking the forest below. Elias followed, stopping a respectful distance away. For my entire life, she said, voice low, connection has been framed as weakness, attachment as leverage. And now, she said, I am standing on a world where no one is watching, speaking to someone who gains nothing from my power. She turned back to him. That is destabilizing. Elias met her gaze. Good, stability isn't always growth. A faint, genuine sound escaped her then, not laughter but something like release. You challenge me without trying to dominate me, she said. That is rare. I don't want to dominate you, Elias said. I want to stand with you. Those are different things. Velaryx considered him for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, not into intimacy, into proximity, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence, the controlled power beneath stillness. If you remain, she said, you do so by choice, not loyalty, not duty. Yes, and you may leave at any time. Yes, she inclined her head, the gesture carrying more weight than any oath. Then stay, she said, for now. Elias felt the simplicity of it settle into something profound. I will. Beyond the mountains, distant stars burned, unaware, uncaring, waiting. Somewhere out there, forces were already moving. Messages would be sent, bounties issued, narratives rewritten. But here, in the space between consequence and intention, Velaryx stood not as terror, not as ruler, but as a woman deciding who she would be next. And Elias realized that whatever came, the most dangerous thing she had done was not defy the council. It was allowing herself to be seen. The future had not closed around them. It had opened. Night arrived gently on the mountain world, not with alarms, not with threat indicators or red-lit warnings, just a slow cooling of the air and the quiet shift of light as the sun dipped below the horizon. Stars emerged one by one, unhurried, as if they had all the time in the universe. Velaryx stood alone on the upper terrace. She had dismissed Elias hours earlier, not as an order but as an invitation to rest. He had gone without argument, though she had felt his reluctance like a faint pressure, respectful but present. Now, with the world asleep and the structure breathing softly around her, she allowed herself something she rarely did: stillness. The mark on her forehead was dark for the first time in memory. No glow, no hum of ancient systems aligning her thoughts toward violence. Just skin, just her. That absence felt unsettling. She placed both hands on the stone railing and looked out across the forest, her mind drifting, not to battles or strategies, but to moments she had buried under necessity. The arena. The way Elias had stood before her blade, unshielded, unbowed. Not because he believed he could win, but because he believed she could choose. That belief lingered like an unresolved equation. A soft sound behind her drew her attention. Footsteps unarmored, unguarded. She did not turn immediately. I thought you might be here, Elias said quietly. You should be resting, she replied. So should you. She allowed that. He came to stand beside her, not touching, not intruding, just present. The forest below whispered with nocturnal life, unaware of the galactic shockwaves already rippling outward from her defiance. "They've started broadcasting again," Elias said after a moment. "Fragments, official statements contradicting each other." "Yes," Velaryx said. "They will try to define what happened before others do." "And you?" She turned her head slightly, watching him from the corner of her eye. "I am done letting them define me." The words felt heavier spoken aloud, more real. Elias nodded. "There will be consequences." "There always are." Silence stretched between them, comfortable now, earned. "You know," Elias said, "when I agreed to stand in that arena, I thought the hardest part would be surviving you. And now—" "And now," he said, choosing his words carefully, "I think the hardest part will be surviving what comes next." Velaryx studied him then, really studied him in the soft starlight. No armor, no weapons in hand. Just a human who had chosen uncertainty over obedience. "You are afraid," she said. "Yes." "Good," she replied. "So am I." The admission surprised her more than it did him. Below them the structure's systems chimed softly, a low-priority alert. Not danger, communication. Velaryx's gaze sharpened. "They've found something," Elias said. "Yes." She extended her hand toward a projection node. Light unfolded in the air between them, resolving into fragmented intelligence reports. Reactions across the Empire. Fleet movements, hesitant, divided. Council factions accusing one another. And beneath it all, a signal ancient, familiar. The mark on her forehead flickered once in response. "This wasn't just a challenge," Elias said slowly. "Was it?" "No," Velaryx replied. She stared at the data, understanding settling into something cold and precise. "The arena awakened systems older than the Council," she said. "Older than the Empire." "And they noticed," Elias said. "Yes." The glow on her forehead returned, not blazing, not violent, but steady. Awake. Elias looked at her. "What does that mean?" Velaryx closed the projection with a gesture and turned fully toward him. "It means," she said, "that my refusal did not just break their control." She stepped closer, not in command, not in dominance, but in shared gravity. "It announced me." "To whom?" Elias asked. She met his eyes, something resolute and quietly fierce settling behind her gaze. "To forces that do not care about councils," she said, "or empires or permission." Elias exhaled slowly. "That sounds significant." "It is." A pause. "Do you regret it?" he asked. Velaryx considered the question, not tactically, not philosophically, but honestly. "No," she said. The answer was immediate. She glanced past him toward the horizon where night met stars. "But I suspect," she added, "that what comes next will test more than my strength." Elias followed her gaze. "What will it test?" Her eyes returned to him. "My ability to remain who I am becoming." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of earth and something older, something listening. Far beyond the mountain world, beyond charts and borders, something vast had turned its attention toward the woman who had refused to die as instructed. And beside her stood a man who had chosen her without knowing the cost. The galaxy had not closed its jaws. It had inhaled. And whatever answered that call would not be satisfied with myths alone.